picture. Well, this is a big article, a full-page article.
Oh, wow.
This is me.
Oh. That's great.
And here's another one. Yeah, I'm not in this one. Granny's in this one.
Oh, yeah.
This is Granny.
That's great.
Wow, yeah.
What year is that? What's the date on that?
1963
Okay.
Wow.
is when the panel started. And this is dated 64, this article. And then this is just a little story that was printed in the anyway, a national magazine about how, but it was, I think, something that the panel wanted us to read,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is for information. And the gist of it is that even though we're making progress on desegregation, and it's still there are problems like that white people would tend to be helpful but patronizing to blacks, you know, and things like that. And I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, it sure is.
The process of all this is happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're ready? Okay, my name is Megan Dunaway. Today's date is February 23rd, 2013. I am interviewing Jean Gordon at her home in Little Rock, Arkansas. We are going to be discussing the Arkansas Public Policy Panel.
Uh-oh. You don't need a dog barking. Let me see if I can get him.
Okay, we had to take a short break, but we're back. So starting with the panel of American women, can you just tell me how you got involved and where it went from there? I know that's a big thing,
Big
but
subject.
starting with the panel of American women.
Okay. Well, Sarah Murphy was a very close friend of mine,
Okay.
and she was at a meeting in Washington, an education meeting, and she met this woman from Kansas City who had told her a wonderful story of what she was doing in Kansas City. And it turned out that Esther Brown was her maid was the Brown of the Brown versus Board of Education lawsuit. And she had worked very hard to raise money to help pay for the lawsuit. Her maid's daughter went to school in this one-room schoolhouse that had I remember the one light bulb in the middle of the room. And so Esther started working with this woman to improve the school. And then during the course of it, she was asked to do a program somewhere, and she came up with the idea of a program about prejudice. And she had a Catholic, a Jew, a black person, and a white Protestant on this panel. And Sarah was so intrigued with the idea of the panel because of all of our race problems in Little Rock. So Sarah invited her to come to Little Rock and see if we could start a panel here. And she did, and Sarah invited about 40 of our friends to a hotel downtown. Someone had said, well, at that time, blacks were not allowed to eat in the hotel, so it must have been an all-white luncheon that she had. So Esther spoke at the luncheon and talked about the panel. Well, everyone there was so excited of the possibility of starting a panel in Little Rock. And so that's how it got started. And it was a real adventure from then on. Sarah had some very strong ideas about what our speeches would be. Each panelist would speak about 5 minutes about her own personal experience with prejudice. And of course, the minority panelists, the Catholic, the Jew, at that time we called them Negroes, and we had a lot of experience with prejudice. But it was to be told in a very personal way, not in any preachy way about how other people ought to act, but just strictly from our own personal experiences. So there were about 5 or 6 women in each position, 5 or 6 women Catholics and Jewish panelists and white Protestants. So we could take turns going on the panels, and we would be with different people on the panels. So it never got to be just a standard thing that we all, kind of got bored with. The exciting part was getting to know each other. Even this sounds strange, but even the white, like I didn't know many Jews, and I didn't know a whole lot of Catholics, although I did have more experience with the Catholics. And then we had one Asian American, and that was really exciting. So getting to know each other was worth the whole thing, even if we had not done anything else. It was for us, it was so rewarding for us to get to know each other. But it was also kind of scary, because we were so afraid we would say something, like we would mispronounce the word Negro. It had to be, and that would be embarrassing for everybody, or it would be condescending, so we were kind of walking on eggshells a lot in the beginning. But then it was so good when we could relax more with each other and make jokes about it, and say, so what? So we may mispronounce the word that, that's not a big deal once you once you trust each other. So, well, I have a lot of. I think this panel was so important to us. Even now, I have a friend who's over 90 years old, and this was probably the highlight of her life. And she loves to talk about it. And now she's getting she's getting Alzheimer's, but still, still this is a big memory in her life.
So why did you, at first, you sound like it was very important to y'all. Y'all were very passionate about it. What drove y'all to be so excited about it? What was the reason behind it?
I guess each of us have a different story, but this was part of the story that we told on the panel. Part of our panel speech was kind of our background, how we grew up, and why, both good and bad, why we were interested. And my story is that I grew up. We had a black yard. Well, he was called a yard boy, and he lived in the servants' quarters. He was a college student, and at night we would put our shoes on the back stairs, and he would polish our shoes, and the next morning they would be all polished on, ready to go to school. And then he would drive us where we wanted to go, and so we thought of black people as servants. Although they were treated very well. Anyway, so when I went away to college, a friend of my mother's, I was going east to college, and a friend of my mother said, "I hear that's a communist college." And my mother said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I hear they have Negro students accepted as students at the college." And so later, when I got to the college, one day I was on the bus with one of the black students going into Boston, and I thought, I wish my mother could see me. My mother's friend could see me now. This black student was president of the Student Government Association of the whole college, which was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Then later, I was on the, when I finished college, I was my father's secretary in Fayetteville.
Mhm.
He was chair of the board of the university trustees when the first black student applied to the law school. Silas Hunt was his name, and he was accepted to the law school. My dad, it was in the wintertime, and the other board members called and said they couldn't get to the meeting, but for my dad to make the decision, which he did, and of course the law student was
Really?
accepted.
Wow.
And he got a lot of comments from people around Arkansas. I'll never send another child of mine to the university. What have you done? What have you done?
Mhm.
And but he got one letter from a woman in Boston who said, "Congratulations, this is wonderful. You should have done it sooner. I wish you'd done it sooner, but it's wonderful you did it." And so my dad wrote her back and said, "Thank you. I'm sure you're working on the immigration problems in Boston where she lived. That we limit people from Africa. We have very strange immigration laws.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I got a kind of a feeling of what was happening in race relations.
Mhm.
And so then when I moved to when all this happened in Little Rock and Governor Faubus, we were just astounded that would happen here. I guess like everybody, we thought things were going along okay.
Mhm.
Anyway, so after, well, of course, there was the Women's Emergency Committee. There was lots of things happening.
Can you talk a little about the Women's Emergency Committee? What just
Okay. Well, one of the big events was the Stop campaign, and I remember at the first meeting of this. Well, when we heard that the governor was firing 42 teachers in our schools, and one of them was principal of our elementary school. We had three children. My husband and I had three children who went to Forest Park School.
Mhm.
And the first meeting of the Stop group, all the parents were so incensed about the firing, came together one night at a big meeting at the school, and my husband was elected to be chair of the petition, distributing petitions
Mhm.
saying stop this outrageous purge.
Mhm.
And so the whole room just stood up and said, "We've got to stop it." So it was organized so well by the Women's Emergency Committee into precincts, and everybody knew where their precinct was, and we went calling, we went door to door and got petitions signed. One of our neighbors were Orthodox Jews, and when I took the petition to their house, we lived 2 doors apart. When I took the petition, they were so excited that they knew I was a friend, because they were just panicked that they would be next.
Oh,
when all
wow.
this race happened, that the Jews would be next.
Wow.
So they were so excited to find friends. Anyway, then, so we won the election. We won it strictly by organizing and getting out the word and going door to door, and it took a lot of people to do it, but basically human nature was good.
Good.
People had good feelings.
So how many people were involved in this?
Oh,
In the Women's
emergency committee, several thousand, a couple of
Really?
thousand women.
Wow.
I was I had 3 young children, and so, I did what I could, and toward the end, I was on the board of the Women's Emergency toward the very end. But early on, most of the time I was strictly a worker, and whatever they told me, I would go and do, knock on doors, and take our children. And our children, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
They did. When I Have a Dream speech later that Martin Luther King made in Washington, my daughter Ann was watching it on television, and she cried. She said, "Mother, if you really believed what you say you do, you'd be in Washington at the speech." She was so upset. Or we would. She said we would. We'd all be there. As it turned out, my husband, Walter Clancy, chaperoned. He was a Catholic priest at the time, and he chaperoned a group, Elizabeth Eckford and a group of the black students, to go to the I Have a Dream speech. They went up on the bus and stayed in a church and came home, and he was their chaperone.
Oh, wow. Oh, neat. Okay, so back to the...
Back to our speeches.
Okay.
Yeah, so my speech was after hearing from the Catholic, the Jew, and then it kind of built up to the black panelist, and then I was the last speaker after the black panelist, and to say I've never been turned down because of my religion or my race, and so then I talk about what's my responsibility as a member of the majority toward those who have been had problems because of their religion or race. And of course the black panelist was the emotional one, and people in the audience would cry when Gwen Riley would tell about her little 6-year-old girl, and she was downtown, a 4-year-old. They were downtown, and she'd say, "How do you tell a 4-year-old she can't drink out of a water fountain?" Oh. And everybody would be in tears. So it was a real dramatic thing we did.
What was the public perception of y'all? I mean, what type of feedback were y'all getting?
A lot of good feedback. I think a lot of people, we may have been a little bit too clannish. We had such a good time with each other that I think we kind of looked like a sorority in a way that a lot of people would like to have joined. And that seems like it's counterproductive.
So what was the goals of the panel of American women?
Just to openly bring up the subject of prejudice and be able to talk about it and be able to see things from another point of view, help people see things from another point of view, ourselves included.
And y'all spent a lot of time in schools? Trying to...
Well, at first it was strictly, we went where we were invited to go to speak.
Okay.
And it was mostly churches, PTAs. It wasn't for students so much as adult. There were mostly adults audiences. And we were invited all over the state, and even went to Memphis and a couple of other out-of-state places. So we traveled together, and we, which was good. We really got to know each other real well.
So Sarah and Brownie were both involved at this point?
Yes.
So what happened there? Because I know that they had differences in which direction they wanted to go. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I didn't get into that. had much. I guess that's when Brownie and Joan went to Central High
Okay.
and started working there.
So which direction did Brownie want to take it?
The school. She wanted to go into the schools.
And Sarah wanted to
Sarah,
stay
I guess,
more-
wanted to stay more of a public panel.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The question period. We back to the panel. We rehearsed a lot. Questions that would come up to be sure we gave answers that were true and that were believable, and that we didn't want to act too Pollyannish, and of course the big question was, would you want your daughter to marry a black or whatever word they would use? That was the big question. And so we would kind of practice how we would answer that question to be sure it was it didn't cause more trouble than it was worth. And what else? There was something else I wanted to say about the questions. And every now and then somebody would ask a question like that, but usually the audiences were much more polite and more friendly. Maybe some people would be a little cool, but wouldn't have the nerve to. That takes a lot of something to speak up and say something like that. We were turned away. I was with the panel when we were turned away at a restaurant.
Oh.
We went to Lone Oak. It was on a Sunday night, and a Sunday night church group of high school students. We were going to we were going to have a panel. And beforehand, we got there early, so we stopped at a restaurant to eat something before the meeting. And there was a counter, and the waitresses lined up and turned their backs to us when we came in the restaurant. They wouldn't say anything. They just turned their backs. And so finally the manager came out and said they couldn't serve us. And it really, we all felt, I've never been turned away. I felt, your stomach, you just kind of think, we're not good enough for them. And especially the black panelist who was with us. It was Gwen Riley, who was head librarian at Philander Smith College. And she felt so bad because none of us could eat, and it was her fault.
Yeah.
So later at the panel, the students were all saying what good race relations they had in their town, that everybody got along real well. And so at the very end, then the moderator of the panel told them what had happened, that we had been turned away from a restaurant in their town because of the black panelists. They were so shocked and upset. So they said they were going to go talk to the manager of the restaurant. And so they did. The next week they went to talk to him, and then they invited us back to come and eat at the restaurant. And which we did, and a friend of my husband's, a Catholic priest, went with us. So we all went down and ate at the restaurant. And I guess from then on he had to accept an integrated restaurant.
Well, I guess that felt like a success,
Yes,
didn't it?
yes, it did. It did.
Wow. So what were some challenges and successes that you can remember?
I guess I can't remember specifically, but just the audiences, that people were so appreciative of what we did. that families speaking out about it. So many people were afraid to speak up one way or the other. It was a time of real quiet by a lot of white people who didn't dare, because of their business or some other reason, wouldn't get involved. But the panel made it so much easier to take a stand.
Mm-hmm.
It really helped people get to
Yeah, so that was a success then to
yes, it was.
to make people feel like it was okay to
Right.
talk about it.
Right.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did you stay involved?
With the panel, I
Mhm.
guess when they started in the schools, they didn't need all these volunteers. There were like what, 30 or 40 people involved with the panel.
Okay.
And so they didn't need all of us at Central High. That's when I guess when I dropped out. But I was involved in a lot of other things. So really, that was it.
So up until Central High?
Up until the panel until Joan and Brownie got involved in the Central High. Yeah. I worked with Brownie later on a legislative bulletin she and I put out, and I guess that was part of her work with the panel. She kept track of every bill that went on in the legislature, and I would go be at her house. It's when Snow was a baby in a crib, and she and Brownie and I would stay up all night long with papers all over the floor of all the bills that were going through the legislature, and we figured out a system of how to keep them up to date and moving them around on the floor. And of course we didn't have any computers, and so it was strictly and I guess she and I had a problem because she wanted to do every little bill that came in the legislature. If it was about building a bridge across a creek in some county, she wanted to record that. And I said, Brownie, nobody cares. And so that's where we had a little difference about that. But I remember one night I got home about 6 o'clock in the morning, and my husband said later, he said, well, I woke up and you weren't here, so I thought there was an earthquake or something. And then he went back to sleep.
So what was y'all's goals with the legislature? What were you planning on? What were you trying to do?
Well, she put out a little newsletter so everybody, to educate people about the bills in the legislature.
Okay.
I think I dropped out of that.
Why was that?
Well, I guess I didn't want to spend all night.
All night?
Yeah, worrying about some little bridge. Anyway, no, but then when the panel, the current panel got started, I've been real interested in it, but I haven't worked in it since then. I've got real involved in peace issues.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing. What's it?
I believe it was in 1972 that Brownie started the Arkansas Public Policy Project.
Oh, really?
I think it was originally called the Project.
Oh, okay.
And then it changed to panel at some point, I think.
Oh, okay.
So you, like at 72, you weren't...
No, I wasn't involved with her in that.
Okay.
I was,
Okay.
Let's see, what was I doing? Well, that's when I went off on, I think I was, had the Whole Person Center. We were New Age growth. And we had all our events here in my house. Everybody would be lying around on the floor doing massage or something, doing Tai Chi. And So in the 70s, that's where I kind of got off into that. But then the peace is what um, I got involved in. War, I guess the Vietnam War and
Can you think of any turning points when you were involved that kind of showed how directions were going to change, or anything like that?
I'm trying to think of how long the panel went. I was elected to the school board in 1965, and we tried to. We hired a group in Oregon to come up with a plan to integrate the schools in Little Rock.
Wow.
And they called it the Oregon Report, which was too bad because the public turned it down. They didn't want these northerners coming in telling us how to integrate our schools. But it was a real good plan because they started little children in their neighborhood schools and then gradually brought everybody together so that at the end there was one high school, but it was only the 11th and 12th grades. And instead they divided it up by grades rather than by locations so that everybody would eventually come together. All the students in town would be in one high school. And the superintendent kind of pulled the rug out from under it, and then the public didn't, so it was never implemented. And then I lost my next race for the school board because this man said he was against busing. And he had a child in a private school. Anyway, so all the liberal, well, as it turned out, they got rid of all of us. But then when the Supreme Court said we had to integrate the schools, it was the conservatives who had to do it. And then the public couldn't get upset with him. So as it turned out, in a way, it was kind of good that they had to do it.
So, what did Sarah do after? I mean, what did she continue to do?
She and I started this whole person center.
Oh, okay.
She and I did
ran
that.
Okay.
She was involved in that.
Okay.
And of course, she still was involved in race relations, and so was I. We both. But and of course, she wrote her book. Later wrote her book about it.
Okay.
That's interesting. She and I went to Kansas City. I hadn't connected that before. To hear one of the big gurus from California in a workshop, and we decided we could start a group in Little Rock, and we wouldn't have to go to Kansas City. George Leonard was his name, and I hadn't connected that the panel started in Kansas City, and then so did the whole person center.
Huh, that is interesting. So did Sarah keep in touch with the woman from Kansas City?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And she came to Little Rock, Esther Brown came, she was raising money for the panel, and she and I flew up to Winrock, and I don't want to tell her, well, we didn't get a good reception.
Oh, really?
At Winrock. They sent their plane down and took us up there, and so we had, well, Jeanette Rockefeller, and she didn't get along. So that was kind of Esther was hoping that Jeanette Rockefeller would be excited about her about the panel and want to support it, and it didn't work out.
Oh. So, was the Little Rock panel really closely modeled on the Kansas City? Did y'all work together kind of in developing?
Well, I guess Sarah kept in touch with Esther Brown, but of course different personalities of people on the panel, so I guess we developed our own thing with it. The people's personalities has a lot to do with it because it was such a personal thing. The stories were so personal. But we kept the same format. Yeah.
Okay. And wasn't there one in Memphis too? Wasn't there
I think
a panel
yes,
in Memphis?
there was.
Was that
there,
after Little Rock?
After Little Rock? Yeah. Right.
That's interesting.
It
Really took off.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were involved, did you see the objectives or mission change, or evolve, like grow, adding new things, or was it kind of the same the whole time?
Our presentation, you
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
of the audiences. Our presentation kind of stayed the same
Okay.
because it was it worked so well.
Okay.
And of course, we kept up with issues and things that were happening because the question periods, the discussion afterwards would be all involved with whatever was happening in race relations at the time. So it wasn't that we just, kept our canned speeches, but sometimes we would change things in our speech to keep current with what was happening. But it's hard to remember. Like it was kind of dangerous for us to drive around in the car with a mixed panel around some places in Arkansas.
Sure.
Things were there was a lot of fear out there. When I read stories like this in the paper, it all seems so, it's hard to believe that people could be that we could have been as separated as we were.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sure you can. I'm sure
it sounds like a different world.
Yeah, I know. When I was defeated for the school board, we were having a group of people here to say I'm sorry. The phone rang and this man said, "I'm so glad you didn't win this election because my granddaughter is in a school and I didn't want her to be in school when you were on the school board." And I said, "What is your name?" He said, "I can't tell you because I'm in business here." He actually said that after.
Wow.
Well, I just burst into tears. That's all I could do.
That's awful.
But there were so many people like that.
I can't imagine. It must have been scary.
Yeah. And so many men would not speak up because of their business. But the men on the panel, we had one summer, we had a party at Barbara Phillips' house. She had a pool in the backyard, and we were all around the pool. The husbands had gotten together. They loved the panel. They had gotten together and written panel speeches. Each one of them had a panel speech, and they were making fun of some of the things we said in our panel speeches. And I would love to see copies now of their speeches. And I hope that somewhere in all this that they're still intact because they were funny. They were really funny. And the husbands had a good time. They had a good time together.
So they were all really supportive.
Oh yeah. And they loved it that we broke the ice and got them. They never would have known each other if it hadn't been for us.
Right.
Right. That was one of the fun. There were a lot of fun things that happened.
So how did y'all just did all this on with your own money? I mean, did you have any support,
Oh,
any funding of any sort, or?
you know, I bet that Sarah and Brownie had had some support. I bet that they did. I can't remember whether we had an official treasurer or whether.
Because if you had to drive
'Cause
all
we-
over the state, I mean,
Right. Or whether just the person that drove, I don't know, took care of it. I don't know.
yeah.
That's funny. I can't. There's some things like that I don't remember.
So you said that there were about 30 or 40 people involved with the panel. Who were they? What did they do?
That's funny. I was just reading this article in the paper, and it lists some of the people that were on the panel.
Okay.
And it grew as the years went by. Some people were in it that maybe were just on one or two panels, you know. But anyway, in this article written in 1964, they say Mrs. Frank Gordon, whose husband worked at the Pyramid Life, or whose husband was an architect or was an accountant, or they always told what their husbands did.
Yeah. That's funny.
So we were all housewives and mothers. We described ourselves on the panel as we're housewives and mothers, and our husbands were and all of them were some kind of professional people. Now Mildred Terry's husband was a postman, and she and I were the same age, and we'd grown up in Little Rock, both of us, on either side of town. And it was so neat to get to know each other, to think we had the same time span, but such different lives in the same town. And we really had a good time getting to know each other.
So it would just be 5 or 6 women on
each panel.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then you just so people would switch out.
Switch out.
Okay. I don't think people realize that there were. I mean, 30 or 40. That sounds like a big number of people willing to go out and talk about this stuff. I don't think people really realize that there were that many people speaking about it.
Right. Well, they would hear about the panel, and then I'm sure some of them said, I'd like to be on that.
So that's kind of how it grew. It's people would just say, hey, I want to be a part of that. So y'all didn't have to try to recruit people to join.
No.
They just
at first, of course, we had to recruit black panelists. And
was that difficult?
Through Philander Smith is how Faustinia Bomar was registrar at Philander Smith, and Gwen Riley was head of the librarian. And yeah, that's mainly how we got the black panelists.
Were they really
they
willing?
Would have a friend.
They weren't scared?
No,
or really?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
No, they seem to think of it as a real challenge that they wanted to do.
So you said you went anywhere you were invited.
Yeah.
Why do you think they would?
Oh, well, some ministers would be in a church, and this would be a way for them to educate their congregation without their having to hit them over the head. And so that would be one way. And then, of course, panelists might know a church or the synagogue where somebody would invite us to come. The very first one was at Westover Hills Presbyterian, where we were members,
Okay.
and it was one of the liberal churches. There were maybe 5 or 6 white churches that were real outspoken about race relations, and ours was one of them. My husband went on TV one night and said, the elders of Westover Hills have voted in favor of public schools. That's all he said. And it was big news. Right away, Leslie Peacock, she's a reporter for the Arkansas Times. Her mother, Alice Newell. The minute that program was over, the phone rang and it was Alice Newell. He stood up on his hind legs and said it. This was a huge thing that he said in favor of public schools. So many.
So how did the word get spread that this is what y'all were doing? How did people hear about it?
Well, I guess
Newspaper articles?
this was one way. Of course, this was after a year. I'm not sure on the date of this one. Just word of mouth, mostly. That's it. At some point, we may have sent out a letter to churches.
Okay.
I don't know. And the PTA, I was president of the citywide white PTA, and we were integrating the black and white PTAs, and I'm sure through the PTA the word got out a lot, and we would go to different PTA meetings around.
Who were some of the key players in this? Like, who were the names that were often
on the panel?
Yeah, like people really involved.
Oh yeah, well, of course, Brownie and Sarah, and Katie Lambright, Barbara Phillips, Shirley Strauss.
Okay.
Jean Gallman. Are you going to interview her? Jean Akins?
She was on the list. I'm not sure.
She's a Catholic panel. Her memory is better than mine. And she talks a lot.
Is she in Little Rock?
She's in Little
Rock. Then I'm sure she is on the list. I remember hearing the name.
Yeah. Well, she remembers lots of details. She can.
Good.
Who else? Joan Campbell. She was Joan Channing. Who else? Oh, Carol Taylor was a Asian Japanese. She talked in her speech about how her father put all these family things. He just tore them up, and all their family scrapbook things. He tore them up and flushed them down the toilet. When he heard about the Japanese internment camps, and they had to come and live in Arkansas in the internment camp, that was just. It was a real dramatic thing that I guess none of us had thought about until she told the story of how it affected her family.
Wow.
They'd lived in San Francisco, and her father was a very educated man. And to be sent in an internment camp over something he had nothing to do with.
Wow. And so that's why she was here? They just stayed here after that?
They just stayed here after.
Do you know why?
I don't know why. I don't know.
That's interesting. Because that's a big part of history. So it's very interesting that y'all had someone.
One is from that. Yeah.
That's great.
Oh yeah, it was an education we learned a lot.
I'm sure.
Before we had heard Jews are clannish, Catholics are clannish. That's why we don't know many of them, because they don't. They like to stick together. They don't want to be out in the community. We had all kind of stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
I found out they're not any more clannish than I am.
Yeah, y'all became a little clan when y'all got together.
Yeah, right.
Funny. Okay. I think that's about all my questions. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Goodness. Oh, I wish I had something wonderful to say, but
I
I will.
said a lot of wonderful things.
It was a wonderful experience
Yeah.
for me and for my children. Sometimes they didn't like being left so much, and sometimes they would rebel a little bit about that. But on the whole, I think they learned a lot.
I'm sure.
So it was. Well, I think it's wonderful that people like Esther Brown, she was one person that was willing to do as much as she did. And then it had so many repercussions after that. Just she affected a lot of people's lives, and it's real inspiring to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all really interesting. Well, thank you very much
Thank you.
participating.
Thank you for participating in the whole project. That's wonderful. And you'll have all this. You've got all kind of material.
Yeah, we've got a lot to go through. But there wasn't so much on the early years.
Well, because of the fire in the office.
There was a fire?
There was a fire in the office and burned a lot of the material. And I'm sorry, I wish there was a place where we had copies of all the speeches.
Yeah, that would be really
Because the speeches were wonderful. They were really written with some humor and some sadness and just very, very engaging.
Yeah, I bet they were very compelling. That would be very interesting to read. But,
So, and maybe Pat, I hope, maybe she'll have some.
Pat was being interviewed this afternoon too, so hopefully, Well, it's been a big help because I learned a lot that I hadn't from the research we've been doing, and it's just interesting getting the person's perspective of it.
Yeah.
So you can read about it, but hearing you talk about it is completely different.
Right, I bet. So how many people are you interviewing?
18.
18.
Yeah, and they include people that are currently on the panel. But we're trying to get as many people as possible. There's 9 people in my class, and we're all doing 2 interviews.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's 18.
Oh, I see.
Just a random number. But it's interesting for sure. And I didn't even know that it existed before we started doing
really?
this. Yeah, so it is really interesting learning about all of
it. Good. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope that someday our WAN group somebody will take on our WAN group, our women's peace group.
Oh.
Women's Action for New Directions.
And you're involved in that right now?
Yeah.
Oh.
In fact, I started the chapter here in Arkansas, in Little Rock. He met Catherine West. She's a member of WAND, and that's what we're having the Nobel Peace Prize winner from Liberia here in April. She's going to speak at the Clinton Library, but at our invitation, WAND invited her to come.
Oh, wow.
And we're working on getting scholarships for students from Liberia, girls from Liberia. Anyway, our chapter is 16 years old. now.
Wow.
And I have tons of material in my office about it, and I want someone to take it out
Yeah.
and do something with it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm.
Pat Young